Welcome back to another episode of Believe in the Press Row, a beautiful Monday here in Seattle post Father's Day. Hope everyone had a happy, healthy, and safe Father's Day. Jonas Siegel coming to you. And it has been, if you follow the blog at torontosportsmedia.com, it has been a most surreal couple of days in the sports media world. First, we had the Steve Simmons scoop, if you will, that Austin Matthews allegedly has tested positive, that followed Steve being on TSN 1050, only to have that interview yanked. It has now reappeared this afternoon, I am told. Yet nobody else is really covering the story. Like, very few people are covering that story. It has been all but squashed. We have it up at torontosportsmedia.com. You can hear the whole interview there. And the second story is more disturbing to me, but it also has appeared to have been quashed. And Ken Campbell of the Hockey News broke the story that Dan Carcillo and another player have filed a class action lawsuit against the OHL and a couple other of the leagues in junior hockey as it relates to hazing. And there is a full detailed discussion of that also at torontosportsmedia.com, including in part a link to an interview, I should say, where my guest today, Brock McGillis, joined Jeff Blair, Stephen Brunt, and Richard Deitch. Brock, how are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. It's I really appreciate you doing this on short notice. I would imagine you've been extremely busy given everything that's going on in the world today.
Yeah, I think this is our number 14. We're over 14 hours straight of media.
So I don't ask all the same questions. What's the number one question people are asking you?
Am I surprised by the stuff in the Carcillo lawsuit?
Okay. So for those who don't know, Brock is Torontonian, at least currently a Torontonian, Canadian raised. He is the first known player to come out as gay, having played in junior hockey, professional hockey as well. Has done an incredible job trying to help educate us on the culture in hockey. I think it goes beyond hockey. It's probably in sport, if you will. I don't think there's all that much difference between any of them with what he had to endure, and he is spending a good chunk, if not all of his life, trying to ease the pain of others who might either have to go through or who are going through, so they don't have to do it alone. The one thing that no matter any of us are trying to take on in this world, the one thing we don't want to do is have to feel like we're doing it alone. Have I accurately described a little bit about you? I mean, in 30 seconds?
I public speak. I act. I'm an LGBTQ plus and I guess mental health activist. I public speak all over the world now. I work in hockey culture, sport culture in general. I will probably privately later disagree with you on all the cultures being the same. I think my personal opinion, I think the language used in hockey culture might be the worst.
Really? What? Yeah. Why do you think that is?
The insularity of the sport.
Go on.
When you look at hockey, when you take most sports, they're played in schools growing up.
Okay.
The football players are at the school after school practicing, and the outside the track team might be there. There might be the soccer teams around the same area. There's men's teams, women's teams. The basketball, volleyball, and other teams all might share the same locker room. So you're around different people. There's educators there. There's school groups that are still around, like academics that are doing extra things. There's gay straight alliances in the school. There's more diversity, whereas hockey is almost segregated off and isolated in this bubble, these arenas, and then broken apart by age. And they're with the same 20 people or 15 kids 6 nights a week, 9 months of the year, from the age of 7. And their coach came from that same culture. There's no academic there or teacher there kind of overseeing it with them. The coach came from the same culture. His assistant coaches came from the same culture. So it's perpetuates this, hockey culture. And then you grow up, you're with the same people until you hit about 16, and then you move away from home. And it's arguably the youngest sport to consistently move away from home. And then you move to these other communities where you automatically have 20 new friends, which are your teammates. And usually, like if you're in the major junior level, that's 7 nights a week or 7 days a week where you're solely with these people. And then you leave to go home in your off season. And who do you hang out with? The hockey players you grew up with. And you train with them and you get ready for your next season and all this. So it's you're constantly around each other. And that's why if you look at hockey, everyone dresses the same, talks the same, walks the same. Like I can go to any mall anywhere. And I speak at, one area I'm really passionate about is speaking at schools. I can go to any school and I can always pick out the hockey kids.
Besides the fact that they're bow-legged?
Yeah, but well, even if they're sitting down, I can pick them out sitting down in a crowd that they've gone there before me. I'll tell you which kids play hockey. It's wild.
Yeah, so you've done 14 hours of interview.
Yeah.
How many of them been with all sports radio stations or all sports other stations?
Today?
Yeah, on this issue, not the past, on the issue of the Carcillo. People are reaching out to you in the last 48 hours. One.
That was the Brunt, Blair, Deitch.
That was last
interview.
Week. That was last.
So this today, nothing with them, nothing with any sports radio shows.
See, so the audience can't see me, but my head is down in it. So we've got umpteen all sports media outlets, TV and radio. I'm going to pick on them just because they come to mind, but has anyone reached out to you from The Athletic?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I've talked to The Athletic. I'm doing something with them tomorrow. I've talked to them in the past ad nauseum about these issues. In the past, I've talked to, I did a bunch of write-ups with the Hockey News and Matt Larkin. Matt Larkin and I are supposed to talk this week again. And Ken and I talked on he's a Sudbury guy too. So I talked to him. But in terms of the all sports networks, no, I haven't. I haven't had.
That's not because you have an exclusive agreement with the with Rogers, with the Sportsnet's Fan 590, right? Like you're not turning.
No,
you didn't turn me down, so I imagine.
No, I will talk to whoever wants to listen and has a platform that can help shift the culture of hockey.
Well, I think I fit into both, and I think my audience does too. So what does that tell you? When we have countless outlets across not just Canada, but North America, that are all littered with former athletes themselves, people who are in and around the game from all levels for years. They're experts, they're talking heads, they're insider, whatever they are, and nobody wants to talk about it.
Well, I think I think many of them, because they're so involved in the culture, I think it's twofold. Number one, they don't like Dan, right? I think Dan Carcillo's past and reputation precede him. And because they don't like Dan, there's no discussion here. I think the other issue is many of the people don't see the issues because they they are so ingrained in the culture that they see, what I see as a microscopic improvement of hockey culture, they see as like leaps and bounds, but I see it in the 1970s in mainstream society, as opposed to, they see because there's Pride Night or because they put in a rule against hazing that, that, hey, we're progressive. And that's where I think a lot of the issues arise with sports media covering this right now. It's twofold. Hockey in particular won't talk about any of it because they think they're progressive. And I think in an interview earlier today, I kind of said they're kind of like the Republican Party. Well, it's true. It's like it's very entrenched in their ways and not willing to budge or shift. And the smallest little shift is like they think they've eradicated homophobia or racism or sexism. So, and then on top of that, I don't think Dan Carcillo, based off his past, which I get his past isn't great, but they don't engage with him.
The ultimate defense in a lawsuit is the truth. So if what he was speaking of was BS, it'd be very easy for any of them to say BS. That's just not true. What he's talking about, and one of them did. Now that individual has since apologized.
Yeah, he.
I'm talking about Andrew Walker. Used to be on the Fan in Toronto, is now out in Vancouver. But
Andrew and I spoke.
The last line, I'll let you get there. But the last line of his, soliloquy last week was, maybe I'm speaking out of turn. I had a really tough time reading all that stuff today. I'm not saying junior hockey is perfect, but it's not as bad as you think. And then he says, if we're talking about accountability, Dan Carcillo should be in prison filing this lawsuit from prison. You have to be wary of a witch hunt, especially guys when Michael, Dick are called into question in reports like this. So go ahead. Like he's posted a very lengthy apology. I did not listen to his show today. Apparently he did the same again on air. When you spoke to him, what was that like? Did you speak to him on air or off air?
No, it was just on socials because I had kind of, when I saw that yesterday, I called it out and we're going to set some stuff up to talk. And I think he is at the very least open and willing to have a conversation about things. I think there's again, you go back to hockey culture and they're like, well, like people aren't being abused, and it's like the same way, or they go, this is 10 years ago, and I've heard that a lot, and I go, yeah, but people said that about when Graham James molested those players. Yeah, but that was 10 years ago. We've come so far. And then David Frost came around, and this one came around, and now we're seeing this thing that Katie Strang has uncovered in USA Hockey, and no, we haven't evolved. It's not as overt maybe as it was before, but we just saw a kid, they're saying, well, it was 10 years ago, Carcillo and blah blah blah, and then we hear a kid say he got cocaine shoved up his nose a year or two ago, and I was trying to explain that to Andrew, and the stories I've heard in junior hockey and in minor hockey and different things, and it's like, hey, there's like, maybe things aren't coming out, but it's also because of the power and influence that a lot of coaches and different people have within the sport that'll impact your career. So they're not coming out with it now, because if you do, you're toast.
Yeah,
you're done. I get threatened to be kicked out of hockey all the time, and I don't attempt to burn it down. Like, I'm pretty, I play a politician pretty well. I'm thinking about getting into politics. And because of it, I've learned so much. And I get accused of burning it down, and it's insane to me that people can't see it. But I think that comes from, and if you look at like this Black Lives Matter movement and talking about white privilege, there's a privilege within that hockey world for those straight white hockey guys who haven't experienced any of this to be able to say, well, it didn't happen to me, therefore it didn't exist, or therefore, or well, this happened back then and the abuse is different today, therefore it's not bad, we've progressed. And it's like, no, that's not progression. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm crazy, but when the Penn State allegations came out against Joe Paternoty,
I said that to him.
There was a lot of outrage then, nationally, and there was a massive penalty when the U.S. gymnastics team.
You got it.
Like, I am really appalled at and listen, like, I don't care who brought it up. They filed a lawsuit, and again, nobody has come out and said. Walker's the only guy who came out and said and put it in words. I'm not saying junior hockey is perfect, but it's not as bad as you think. No one else that I've seen has said that.
Apparently, Burke and Bourne did.
Okay.
Apparently, they both said that it's so much better, and there's provisions put in today, and there's rules against hazing and different things, and
there's rules against drinking and driving too. People still do it.
Well, yeah, there's rules against stealing. It still exists, and the way I've tried to explain to people when they go, well, Dan Carcillo was the biggest offender, I'm like, well, yeah, fair, but when people suffer abuse, studies show abuse, and on top of that, just because Dan, was a jerk at that point in his life, doesn't mean his claims aren't valid, and doesn't mean that he didn't experience abuse. And it would be the equivalent of a sex worker saying that they were raped. Well, do we not believe them because they, are sex workers? Like, I don't know. I think, like if this exists, it exists. And it's something that it's easier to try and sweep under and not engage with, because then other people's shit will all come to the surface. And it's easier to disengage or say it's improved or brush it off than actually systemically look at the culture of hockey and shift it.
So riddle me this, Batman. Junior hockey, I'm not saying junior hockey is perfect, but it's not as bad as you think. Is it?
It's worse.
It's worse.
It's worse than you think.
Like, I got to tell you, so
and
you're
that's all hockey. That's not just junior. That's all hockey.
So you're in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
In the last 5 years, at least in the last 4 years, St. Mike's College at the corner of Bathurst and St. Clair-ish, went through a case where some teenage boys sodomized another couple of boys at the school. Like, that to me is pretty bad. When I read that these kids in hockey are forced to bob from apples, but they're not bobbing out of water, I figured, all right, they're bobbing out of tequila, vodka, some concoction of booze. But to hear that it's human fluid, like, that is one of the most, if not the most vile thing that I've ever
heard. And to the point of people saying Carcillo wants to burn down hockey. So I keep hearing that. If he did, but if that was his full intent, wouldn't he have named all the players who, were the veterans doing that?
Yeah,
like just from a logical perspective, wouldn't he have called each person out individually, one by one? The only people he's ever taken on and challenged are people with massive platforms. Like,
I want to get back to the fact that kids were forced to bob for apples in human flu. Like, did you ever witness that? I was like, is that like a known game?
no, I did have a teammate shit in my shoe.
That's disgusting, but it's not having to.
Yeah, it's not the same extreme. I mean, I've seen a lot of stuff in the hockey locker room. There's no doubt. Nothing to that extreme.
Were you surprised when you read that?
No, nothing there shocks me.
Like, that to me is, I don't care who's saying it. If there's a morsel of truth, and again, nobody has come out and said, yeah, now granted, it's a legal case, but nobody's come out and said these allegations are false, they're made up. Like,
as of even 2 or 3 years ago, most of the teammates came out and said it was true.
Like, I don't, like, this should be front, along with Black Lives Matter, Corona, this should be front page news round the clock. And you told me earlier that, you know, you did 14 hours and, you know, like, I just don't get it. I do not understand. This is Canada's game. And if this,
that's why.
If this stuff is like, how is that possible?
That's why. Take it a step out of, take it. So we're talking about the insularity of hockey, but then you look at hockey culture or the sport itself. Everyone feels attached to it in a sense.
Yep.
You know, there's some connection to the sport at some capacity for 90% of Canadians.
Yeah.
So to hear that something that is essentially Canadiana, you know, our identity could be bad or wrong. Maybe it says something about Canadians, and maybe it says something that we're not as, you know, there's Canadians are so nice and they're so great and this and that, but maybe in fact we're not. It's like, even through Black Lives Matter, people kept saying, oh, I'm so happy I'm Canadian. And I was like, oh yeah, have you Googled residential schools? Have you looked at what happened to Japanese people in Vancouver, like, or in BC? Like really, our history isn't much better, if at all. And but it would take self-reflection. I say Canadians are more polite than Americans as a whole, but at least in America, you have a sense of who likes you and who doesn't. You know, it's more direct and to the point. But in Canada, and I think that is a deeper rooted issue than all of it, is the self-reflection that would have to happen amongst Canadians that will never happen.
So Sean Fitzgerald has a great book out called Before the Lights Go Out. And I'm looking at Amazon on my computer right now, and it said, a love letter to a sport that's losing itself, from one of Canada's best sports writers. I think Amazon wrote this. Canada hockey is approaching a state of crisis. It's become more expensive, more exclusive, and effectively off limits to huge swaths of the potential sports-loving population. Youth registration numbers are stagnant. Efforts to appeal to new Canadians are often grim at best. The game increasingly does not resemble the country of which it's for so long and been an integral part. With an asterisk. And by the way, let me tell you what's going on in the locker rooms in that sport. Like, he needs to write either another chapter or another book.
But and that's just not major junior. And I've been saying this over and over. This is an issue at every level. I had a parent of 10-year-olds come to me who's the coach of the team was calling the kids faggots, and nice haircut, fag, and would make racist and homophobic remarks to officials. And the parent went to the association, complained. They did nothing. His kid got cut the next year for speaking out. Other parents were afraid to speak out. And, you know, I took it to the OHF. They did nothing. I talked to the OHF about a number of different issues in hockey. Heck, the OHF asked me to sit on their board of directors. And when I met with somebody, and you're the first person I told this, one of the things that was said to me by somebody who interviewed me, who sits on the board of another association, was, yeah, we're looking to grow the game by bringing in Asians. There's a lot of them.
Take a deep breath for a second. Let me pay a bill for a second. We'll come back to that. Sleep Envy is more than a mattress. Customize your mattress by taking a 1-minute quiz. It ships in a box that comes right to your door. Try it for 100 nights in the comfort of your home. Shipping is always free. If you're not satisfied, which is highly unlikely, they pick it up and refund you 100% of your money. Use the code PRESSROW at checkout to get 25% off. 10% of sales is going to feed the hungry during the corona shutdown. Go to sleepenvy.com. That's SLEEPENVIE.com. Enter the code PRESSROW at checkout for 25% off your purchase price. So you've made the rounds, and I heard part of the interview with Brunt, Deitch, and Blair. Kudos to them to at least having you on.
Yeah, I was impressed. I was happy about that.
What when it's over and you listen to that or replay it in your mind, what was your takeaway from that interview?
My takeaway was that people who cover hockey at the station, at least for one or two of them that were sitting there that day, told them that hockey's fine and that hockey's improved. And I got the sense that at least one of them really believed it and wasn't really buying what I was saying.
Who's that? Who do you think doesn't think we have a problem here?
Oh, it was just in tone. I mean, so maybe we'll leave his name out of it.
Okay.
But you can hear it. You'll hear it.
Yeah.
But I got the sense that one of them didn't believe it. One of them definitely believed it, and one of them seemed unsure. And you know, that could be just, again, tone. I don't want to excuse any of it because it wasn't, you know, like they overtly said that. Yeah. They did seem open for more engagement. It was a crazy show. I was supposed to be on at 2 and then 3 and then 4:50 because that's when Simmons came out with the Matthew stuff. And that's when all the Blue Jays shut down their spring training at the same time. So it went like, it was a madness afternoon, I think. And I don't know. I think that, again, people seem to think that hockey reporters are woke, and one of them used that term. And
like they've been enlightened?
Yeah, and maybe they're woke by hockey standards, but that isn't woke. That isn't, you know, like step out of the bubble and see the world and come back. That is, you know, you're ingrained and entrenched in a culture that's been the same for decade after decade, and you know, it hasn't evolved. And you have the same people gatekeeping at all the levels that have been there forever. Like, people were throwing around the board of Hockey Canada today, and it's all, you know, white guys over 60 who, you know, don't necessarily reflect totally the culture today, to not have any diversity at all. And it's the same with the OHF board. It's the same with USA Hockey. Like, I think they have USA Hockey employs 2 Black people, and I don't think they employ any LGBTQ plus members. I don't know if Hockey Canada employs any LGBTQ plus people, but you know, it's so if you haven't stepped out, like I'm pretty fortunate that I've, you know, been immersed in that culture, and to the detriment of my health and everything else. And but I've also, because of my sexuality and everything else, I've been forced to step out, and I've sort of seen the world from both sides. And now I've been able to critically assess, and you know, and I talk to academics. Do you know there are a lot of academics who study different things within men's hockey, whether it's homophobia, racism, sexism, abuse, all these things are all studied, and none of these groups go to them. Like, I was on with Ron McLean last week, and Ron's the first one I've seen. He's had Courtney Z on, who studies Cheryl McDonald on with me, who studies homophobia in hockey. And but Hockey Canada, OHF, NHL, USA Hockey, CHL, nobody goes to them. Nobody goes to them to engage in this stuff. And you know, they have the same people on the same task forces and the same committees and everything else, and nothing ever changes. So for them to say it's improved because they put in rules is bullshit.
Well, I'm going to say something that's going to probably bring back a memory, but it's a lot like don't ask, don't tell.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Completely. You know, it really is. And it's, you know, it's become that in the culture. It's like, let's turn a blind eye, and now it's not overt what's going on, and we don't really talk about it, but this stuff still goes on. Even just from the small things like language in locker rooms, you know, like the language in locker rooms is still racist, sexist, and homophobic. Hockey players put each other down typically by using homophobia and sexism, and that is a reality. And when there's players of color, they're put down using racist language. And that is something I try and curb. And I was going around the O for a bit. I couldn't get them. I was the only program they had that they wouldn't make mandatory. So I stopped doing it, because if they're not going to completely buy in, I'm not going to spend my time doing it. But it's you know, disappointing, because it was starting to shift things and have people recognize the culture. But hockey culture is so bad. Name me another sport where a player would be traded twice because he enjoys reading and libraries and art museums. Name me another sport where an elite player, a 6'5" right-hand shot defenseman who can skate and put up a point a game like Dougie Hamilton, would be traded twice because he doesn't fit into the culture, because he doesn't drink and party with the boys. But I try and shift it now. When I go to teams, one of the things I do after I've humanized issues is I talk about the conformity in the culture. So one exercise I do is I get them to share something. You call yourself a family or brothers or some analogy like that. Every team uses that crap, right?
Yep.
And share something with me you wouldn't typically tell a teammate that you enjoy. I had a tough guy of a team stand up and say, I love writing poetry. No, I'm not kidding. I had another player in major junior stand up and say, if I don't make the NHL, I'm going to be a zoologist. Then a first-year player jumped out of his seat and said, I love animal documentaries. The coach stood up and said, I love Broadway musicals. My wife and I go to them every summer. Now they're bonding on a deeper level. Now they're breaking some barriers of the conformity within the sport, where all you're allowed to talk about are women, sports, and partying. So now maybe that Muslim kid that's playing hockey in Canada can, you know, stand up and be in that room and feel comfortable. The black player who doesn't have anyone else that looks like him around can stand up and be comfortable. That gay kid can say, I like men, you know, and we start to break down the barriers so it shifts. But it's, you know, like the people in church don't want that. Hockey culture doesn't want to evolve.
So that was my question. So the game has evolved. The goon is gone.
Yes.
The enforcer is gone. Skill is now carrying the day. But what you're talking about is revolutionary change. So if you could wave your magic wand, where's the top of the funnel to you? Where does this begin? Where do we start?
I think it's a three-tiered approach. I think it started recognizing the issues that exist. And, you know, racism, sexism, homophobia, mental illness, abuse, all those things. And you recognize them at three levels: NHL, junior, major junior to junior, like USHL, major junior, that type of thing. I think those kids have more influence in culture and society than NHL players. I really believe that, because I equate them to like YouTubers or Instagram influencers, where they're accessible, they're revered by adults the same way as an NHL player is, except their peers look up to them and then copy kind of their, you know, their language, their behaviors, their trendsetters in you know, their age, and they're within amongst their peers, and they're accessible to youth who look up to them. Whereas Sidney Crosby or Connor McDavid, that's Brad Pitt. That's somebody you're not going to meet.
Right.
But you're going to see this guy at the bar in the small town Ontario or Canada or US, right? So I think the NHL there, and then grassroots at the minor level, minor hockey. And I think the first step is humanizing the issues.
Do you think
you need?
Wait, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, finish your thought. Finish your thought. It's more important.
Oh,
that's my question.
Okay. You need people who have the lived experience within the sport to humanize it, because it is so insular, they won't listen to anyone else. So you take people who have experienced, there's enough people, there's the Sheldon Kennedys of the world who have experienced abuse. You take people like myself who speak on, you know, their experience being gay in the sport. You take a woman who's been in the men's side of the game and talk about the sexism that she's experienced. You take a player who's Black or a person of color and share their experience with racism within it. And we've seen, especially through the Black Lives Matter movement, that once you humanize things for these people who have been in this insular bubble, they want to learn more. You can't just shove education at them, and you can't just shove discipline up. Humanize first so they recognize. Then from there, you work with those academics that I was mentioning, and you start to engage with them to put together proper educational components that will work within the constructs of the hockey environment. And then from there, you look to reform. And from there, you look at, instead of doing, you know, just suspensions, you look at different ways to engage on when, you know, somebody gets out of line or says the wrong thing or does the wrong thing, et cetera, et cetera. But it's got to start with that humanizing aspect, because they don't know that there's a world outside the rink. You know,
does the fact that the rise of pro athletes coming out of college hockey, does that give you any hope?
No, because I think they're in the same bubble. It's just a different bubble.
So the fact that the U.S. has the grown-ups around that you talked about, the teachers and stuff, the U.S. college environment, you don't think is any better?
No, because hockey the teachers aren't around the rink.
Okay.
It's hockey people around the rink. The culture shifts when you move over to the rink. They may be a little more aware because they're in class, but a lot of the times, like if they're going to school at 18 and they think they're making the NHL, how engaged are they with academics? Whereas I think players, if you look at like Canadian university hockey players, and this isn't an American or Canadian thing, but most of them recognize at that point that their careers are over and they're really immersed in studies. A lot of them are. So then at that point, so if you took a fourth year player, you know, or fifth year NCAA player who's immersed in his studies and is focused on his future outside the sport of hockey, he might be a little more self-aware because he's engaging in study groups and he's doing different things, and he's, but that person who's taking the bird course to get by and then go play sport, that's no different than the kid taking the one university or college course in the OHL.
Do you think that the personalities at the various sports outlets have been told thou shalt not discuss this?
I've wondered that. I think there's might be something to the fact that there's I don't understand TSN. I thought they'd be all over this. I thought Landsberg, I thought different people would be, this would be nonstop talk. I understand if, that's being told to Sportsnet because, they hold the NHL rights and the CHL rights. So that would make sense to me. I just think that, again, you go to TSN, one of the first people to rip Carcillo was O'Neill. And, from all accounts, great guy, but, track record isn't all that much better. And that's, again, allegedly. I don't know him personally. But I look at, I think they don't like Carcillo, and they also don't like shifting hockey culture because that's all they know. They've never stepped out. And that's why hockey people usually go into media covering hockey or coaching or management or skill development or training. I ran a hockey training business and then on a skill development business, 2 different businesses for 6 or 7 years. And I finally got fed up because I was having kids come to me who were actually struggling in real life and about to kill themselves. And I went like, the fuck am I doing? Little Johnny didn't get power play time tonight, and I get phone calls till 4 a.m. from mom and dad. And I'm like, this isn't like an issue. This isn't, so for me, my involvement in hockey culture is to try and get it to become an empowerment tool for all these kids that are struggling.
In fairness to TSN, Rick Westhead did, as he always does, he did a great job covering it.
He's awesome. But he's more of an investigative journalist than he is somebody who is a hockey guy immersed in hockey. Do you know what I mean? Like he seems to be more down that path than the hockey media people who are, day in, day out hockey, who grew up in the hockey world, who played the sport and who talk about it nonstop.
Yeah, listen, like as I started with, the last 3-4 days has been the most surprising since I've done this. 2 stories being, for the most part, buried.
Well, 3. I would say 3. I would say that Eric Guest story got buried too.
True. I was going to lump that, how a kid being forced to snort cocaine. Like, I just don't get, like, listen, people were appalled with the amount of money that these players were spending at rookie dinners. And I understood that the hazing, so to speak, had graduated to that. And I'm going to duck when I say, like, I almost don't have a, like, if they need to do something, if that's what they're doing, although it's disgusting, it's obscene, it's a different kind of obscene. It's not humiliating. It's completely unnecessary, but I don't think it necessarily goes to the same level of personal injury, if you will, that the things in that lawsuit or the things that we've all heard about happening, shaving body parts, etc. Those things are, to me, that there's a line, and a rookie dinner doesn't cross it, where those anything that involves the touching or doing something to somebody's body or making them ingest something is crossing a line.
I just think all of it's bullshit. There's no need for it. Like there really isn't. If you can, the mentality should be like, let's just play the sport. Let's, you don't need to buy somebody a meal to bond, and over the course of the season you probably get each other's meals anyway, so like why even do that, you know what I mean? And this other stuff is just so barbaric and archaic, and um even rookie parties, or just making people drink, and I did it, and I took part in those things and saw it, and but it's absurd. It's absurd, and the actual ramifications of it on some people are traumatic. Like, and I don't understand what it's going to take for hockey culture to want to evolve. Is it going to be the kid that's bullied into killing himself? Is it going to be the gay kid that couldn't handle it and did die, like how I probably should have all those times when I was in major junior and tried to? Is it going to be more lawsuits? Because and I've been very vocal in any media I have done to the rest of hockey that they're really lucky right now that this is only a CHL matter.
Well, I can tell you that I went to the University of Vermont undergrad. 4 to 4 years, there was a fraternity-related death there. I graduated in '94, and my son is now looking at U.S. colleges, and the Greek system is alive and well.
And that's my point, right? So when cultures don't shift and evolve, and they perpetuate themselves, and then abuse people. So it just continues over and over, and then they become coaches and perpetuate the culture, and hockey people stay in hockey and keep the bubble real tight. And that's why it is the way it is.
And it has
until they let.
Well, I was just going to say that wanting to change that isn't about ending the game. And it isn't about ending the love of the game, nor the promotion of the game.
Oh, when I call this, like, I've called out the NHL on a few things in the past, and when I do, I get death threats, like literal death threats, and or people within the sport accuse me of trying to burn it down. I have thousands of stories that if I wanted to burn down the sport of hockey, I could burn it.
Mm-hmm.
I could take, the gasoline in one hand, the match in the other, and it would be burnt. I'm intent. What's that?
You still watch?
Yeah, not as much as I used to. If there's a Raptors game on or a Leafs game, I'm watching the Raptors.
Okay.
I still do watch. I don't engage as much as I used to. I have a hard time with it. I have a hard time because of the culture of it. I have a hard time because of the pandering to the LGBT community by having a pride night, but you're not shifting anything in your culture to make it inclusive for queer kids. I have a hard time when, there's so much racism and they don't stand up at the NHL level for JT Brown, and, they leave him out there on an island alone. There's a lot of things that I struggle with at that level, all the way down to the minor hockey level. And up until a few years ago, I was coaching AAA and helping out junior teams and different things, you know what I mean? And I really struggle with it.
Well, I'd like to say that I'm optimistic. And I think what would have led me to be optimistic is if there was as much outrage to this as I thought there would be. And I'm shocked that there isn't.
I think everyone's afraid. I think they're afraid for their own jobs. I think it's the same reason why things get covered up in minor hockey, including the abuse scandal in the U.S. By the head of USA Hockey. People have, in the hockey world, I don't think there's a lot of angels. And we've been a part of a system and a vicious cycle of abuse and oppression where we've, inflicted on one another. And as soon as somebody's story comes out, or they get canceled or fired, or you condemn them, all your skeletons will come out.
Well, I am hopeful that there appears to be progress being made in management that hopefully will lead to revolutionary change. It's disheartening, to say the least, as a parent and as somebody who loves the game. I don't equate the two. I really struggle to equate the necessity for a certain culture versus to go alongside with the love of a sport and the playing of a game. And I don't know why. I just don't get why they necessarily have to be tied together.
I agree.
This has been great. Keep on keeping on. You're doing really good, important work. I really appreciate you doing it, and I hope we can have you come back sometime.
Well, thank you. No, I appreciate it anytime. I mean, I'm working on something right now on, I started this week putting motions in place to start a queer hockey alliance and to really shift and get seats at tables and push to evolve the sport. So I'll let you know how that goes.
Yeah, listen, we're always here to have you on. Again,
Well, thank you.
Really appreciate it. It's been somewhat depressing, but it's good to see that you're doing the work, and I hope it brings upon some change.
You know what? It will happen. It's going to take time. It's just waiting in the interim.
So remember, this is Believe in the Press Row. Sign up so you can get these automatically downloaded into whatever way you listen to your pod. Sign up, subscribe, and we will see you next time in the Press Row. Thanks a lot.